Thank you. Within the past 50 years, there was a young, eager, 20-year-old football player at the University of Kentucky. This wasn't just any ordinary player at the time. He was different. He was an outcast on his team because a single facet of his identity differentiated him from the rest of his teammates. He was by far the minority in his locker room, and he grew up constantly feeling inferior as he noticed that people like him were being systemically oppressed in American society. And then around his time in college, there was a U.S. Supreme Court ruling in favor of people like him, granting them equal rights. This favorable ruling, however, was then met by polarized reactions by the American people. There were marches in streets, gatherings at state capitals, and demonstrations in cities around the country, both in favor of and protesting against people like him. If you thought that I was describing an African American, you're correct. Well, partly correct. Let's venture down that route first. The man that I'm describing, his name is Nate Northington. Nate played football for the University of Kentucky in the late 1960s. And Nate broke the sport's color barrier by becoming the first African American football player to play in a football game in the Southeastern Conference on September 30th, 1967, when Kentucky played Ole Miss at their home field in Lexington. This historic event occurred just years after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, and just about a decade after the Brown versus Board of Education ruling. I cannot imagine what that time was like for him. I cannot imagine the amount of derogatory names he must have heard describing him or people like him, humans of color. I cannot imagine not having a role model to look up to in his locker room or in society that were in the shoes that he wanted to fill. I cannot imagine the loneliness he must have felt in his locker room. And I cannot imagine having the opportunity to, and burden of, blazing not only his own trail, but the trail for an entire region of the United States. I want to take you back to that story I told at the beginning. The story about a 20-year-old football player at the University of Kentucky. That story happened twice, nearly 50 years apart. However, one player had the courage to break this barrier. However, the other player did not. Nate Northington had that courage. The other player did not. And that other player would be me, Landon Foster. And this may come as a shock to you, but I was not trying to break the color barrier in the SEC. However, I was, still am, and always will be, gay. I too played football for the same Kentucky Wildcats nearly half a century after Nate did, where I was a 4-year starting punter from 2012 to 2016. During my career, which was very up and down, I experienced everything from being named All-American to being benched in the middle of a game during my senior season. And just as Nate was at Kentucky around the time of the Civil Rights Movement, I was at Kentucky in the midst of one of the most, if not the most, critical times in LGBTQ history. The summer before my senior season, on June 26, 2015 to be exact, the U.S. Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage. It was the first day that I truly felt hopeful that I could live a normal life, that I was normal. Because for the first 21 years of my life, I certainly did not feel that way, especially in the state of Kentucky, and definitely in an SEC football locker room. Yet within a few short weeks of this favorable ruling, the state of Kentucky quickly became the center of national attention, as Kim Davis, a district clerk located just 50 miles outside of Lexington, refused to issue a marriage license to a same-sex couple. The very state, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, whose name will forever be attached to my name on my resume, and whose namesake I wore across my chest proudly every fall Saturday while playing in front of 70,000 of its passionate fans, citizens, and constituents, provided the biggest slap to my self-confidence and self-worth just weeks before my senior season, reinforcing my preconceived notion that I was inferior, that I was unworthy. And it was at this point that I had a decision to make. I could either come out and stand up and speak up for what I believe in, or I could wither away back into my own closet. And I chose the latter. I chose to remain in my closet, which was in front of 70,000 fans every fall Saturday, where I felt most comfortable in Commonwealth Stadium. See, I've punted in front of 100,000 screaming fans in Neyland Stadium in Knoxville, Tennessee. Punted backed up in my own end zone in the swamp in Gainesville, Florida. And between the hedges in Athens, Georgia. I've been featured on ESPN's Not Top 10 for losing us the game against the then number 1 ranked Mississippi State Bulldogs my junior season. As a punter, I had to catch a ball, rotate it, take 2 steps, punt it as high and as far as I could, while 250-pound men are rushing at me, doing everything they can to block my punt, all within 1.2 seconds. And coming out of the closet, unveiling one's true identity is infinitely more terrifying than any of those. See, I was able to withstand the criticism that I received by both my coaches and fans for a poor performance on the field. And rest assured, I received plenty throughout my career by both parties. See, being told that my performance was inferior was easy to brush off. It's what I did. And I could dedicate hours to trying to improve and perfect my craft. But to possibly be told that I was inferior because of who I am, I have yet to experience anything as frightening. Right before my senior year, I had the opportunity to come out and become the first openly gay, active college football player in big-time college football, just months after Michael Sam had publicly come out after his senior season, around his NFL draft day. However, I didn't. I caved. Why? Some reasons are unique to my situation, but the following are hurdles that I faced, and each of you will face if, no, when you're in the position to break your own barriers, either in your personal or professional life. The good news is that these hurdles can all be overcome. However, overcoming them will take both effort and courage. So let's look at what Nate had the courage to do that I did not. Number 1 is the courage to be authentic. This is absolutely fundamental. You must have the courage to be yourself. Because I truly believe that we all live somewhere in between who we really are and who we believe we are supposed to be. Because we aspire to be loved, we aspire to belong, and we aspire to be important. And during this quest for love, belonging, and importance, we suppress some parts of our true selves. Now, I'm not advising you to go live a rebellious or contrarian life. However, I am saying that you must be vulnerable in stating your own thoughts, feelings, emotions, concerns, and opinions. I'm not saying that you should express your opinion on every single topic, nor am I saying that your opinions will be the correct one. However, I am saying that you must have the courage to just be the real you, 100% of the time. There is a Latin phrase, esse quam videre, which means to be rather than to seem. And I remember being taught this phrase haphazardly by my U.S. government teacher in my senior year in high school. And maybe this phrase stuck out to me so clearly because I'd already felt like I was leading people astray by trying to be straight. Because everything that I'd known about myself and my passions and my personality represented that of a type A, goal-oriented, driven athlete, except for the fact that I was gay. I thought I couldn't quite possibly like men and also play football, simply because I didn't know of any other college football players or players in the NFL that were gay while I was in high school or even college until Mike came out. I subconsciously thought I could just outwork or outcompete this gay thing. However, it took 22 years of my life walking on this planet to realize that my sexuality isn't my competition. It's not something I can defeat. It's just simply a part of me, my authentic self. Number 2 is to have the courage to challenge the status quo. And whether you're challenging the status quo in a job, in research, in politics, in sports, or in your personal life, this courage only comes once you have first found the courage to both live and speak authentically. This courage to forge your own path, to walk your own path in your life, only comes once you have first developed the courage to live and speak authentically. Thinking independently is challenging, and it will not guarantee material success. However, it will guarantee that you live a more authentic and amazing life that you will be proud of. And lastly, number 3 is the courage to fail. The idea of embracing failure and learning from it is a well-accustomed cliche in the startup community. However, it is just as relevant in our personal lives. And the key to embracing failure is to know that you gave your best effort into accomplishing something significant for the greater good, all while being true to yourself. And then you can learn from that failure by having the confidence to get back up and try again. And whatever barrier it is that you are trying to break, whether it is 170 on the LSAT or formulating the newest drug, you most likely will not be successful on your first try. Unless you're coming out of the closet, then, from my experience, one try is all it takes. But the key to embracing this failure is to remove the negative association that we subconsciously associate failure with from our own self-worth and ego. It's what I had to do to not just accept, but to embrace my sexuality. What my surrounding environments for the first 22 years of my life had told me was a failure. And the best way I know how to embrace such failure is by living in a manner that allows me to look into the mirror at night and know that I lived that day as the most authentic version of myself. I'm able to look into the mirror and know that I had the courage to embrace any failures by challenging any status quos that I truly believed were for the betterment of myself, my team, my community, or my country. And when I have that kind of peace of mind, I know that there are no challenges as I see too difficult to take on, or any barriers I see as too difficult to break. I believe we can all reach a higher level of sustainable confidence to break whatever barriers we will face in the future by living authentically, challenging the status quos, and embracing any and all failures that we will inevitably face along the way. So go live your life. Have courage. Break barriers. Thank you.